Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jerry Brown, your guest host, and I'm delighted to be joined by Nat Parkin, Strategic Marketing and Innovation Lead at Pluxee, and Matt Phelan, co-founder of the Happiness Institute. The Happiness Index. Nat has spent over a decade working across employee recognition, incentives, benefits, and engagement, including 8 years running O2 Telefonica's recognition and incentive program. She is known for starting the conversations everyone's already having in their heads, but daren't stay out loud, and is inviting you all to do the same today. Matt co-founded the Happiness Index, drawing on data from over 250 million data points across 5 million employees in over 180 countries. He's a TEDx speaker, podcast host, and author of 2 books on employee well-being and business performance. This session picks up where they left off at the Employee Engage Summit, where they ran out of time. Today, they're going back in. And the chat is open throughout. You'll see the opportunity to ask your questions. This is a safe space. We want honest reactions, not polished ones. At the summit, some of the most candid contributions came from the audience, and we want the same energy here. So add your thoughts as we go, and we'll pull them into the conversation live. So let's get started. Over to you, Nat.
Afternoon. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today. I'm hoping that we have people that were with us at Battersea at the event. I think the people there, they know how it ended. It was mid-conversation. Me and Matt were getting kicked off the stage. And there was also not enough headphones. So I'm hoping we do have some of you there. What we just want to do is, for anybody that wasn't in the room, is to kind of just show you where we kind of started with the conversation with the data, and just call out that recognition in the UK has never properly worked. And as you can see from some of these stats from Gallup, 90% of the UK employees are not engaged at work, and UK sits 33rd out of 36 European countries for engagement. And then where we bring in Matt and Matt's data, and I'll get Matt to talk about a little bit more about what he's done. So I'll hand over to Matt.
So just for those that want to have a read, I've just dropped in the research study that is on the right-hand side of the screen. So it's the Global Workplace Happiness Report. Long story short, without reading the hundreds and hundreds of pages and millions of data points, it says that companies are investing in the areas that are least important to the employees. So part of that is because of what Nat and I are going to go on to speak about today, which is the elephants in the room. Some of this stuff just isn't discussed in meeting rooms. And I think that's why we ran out of time at the conference, because so many people were getting in the chat and getting involved in the conversation. So again, get in the chat and speak to us. Do download the report and put your own interpretation on it as well. So that's just a bit of context.
So just again, what we brought to the room in Battersea is the 5 elephants that, kind of after speaking with Matt, speaking to HR leaders, speaking to my own HR leaders, what are the things that people don't say? And again, just kind of backing up what Matt just said, this session works where we have all of you engaged. We really want you to comment, because it's not just from our point of view, it's also, but we're hoping these specific ones were the ones that kind of everybody got. So what we did is we got the room to vote on which elephants they wanted to discuss in more detail, which I will then share the next slide. And as you can see, 30% voted for managers have fallen out of recognition entirely. We then went on to speak about most recognition is just performative. So these ones were discussed in the room. What then happened is people then added their own. So what we want to do is continue that conversation and discuss the elephants, so 1, 2, and 4, and also we've added in those new elephants that were discussed or added to the group chat, which I will share here.
Great. Well, as you mentioned, there were some elephants that you simply didn't get to, and we're definitely going to be talking about those today. So the first one that we want to talk about is elephant number 1. We ruined recognition by turning it into a target. Nat, what do you think about that?
So before me and Matt kind of discuss a bit more in detail, what I would like everybody to do, if possible, is put their thumbs up or comment if they've ever been sent a recognition message because they've had to, not because maybe they deserved it in that moment, because the dashboard said that you were behind, for example, or you were a team manager and you were told that you had to send a certain amount each month or each quarter. So if you could kind of share that with us. Matt, over to you on that.
Yeah, I think for those who are not familiar with it, there's a really great phrase called Goodhart's Law. And Goodhart's Law is once a metric becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. So why I think that's really important. If you take some of these subjects, I work at the Happiness Index, and that's working on recognition every day. The difference between a metric and a target in my mind is if you take something like heartbeat. Now, a healthy heartbeat is about a healthy rhythm. It's not about saying, oh, let's make heartbeat a target, because that might be the fact that you're about to have a heart attack, or it might be another reason. So the reason I think making certain metrics a target is dangerous is because smart leaders will achieve that target, but it doesn't mean you've achieved the behavior that you want from behind it, because the research on recognition is solid, right? It does make people happier, it makes them perform better and so on. But the clue is in Goodhart's name as well, which is it has to come from the heart. And I had an example of it this weekend, as I was just sharing off air, which is the football season has ended and I got lots of notes from the children thanking me for being their coach. But one of them had definitely been run by the parent through ChatGPT. And we joked about it and we had a laugh about it and it was fine. But it was funny. Like, it was better to have like a scrabbly little written one from a kid that is trying to articulate what they're saying versus one that the parent felt had to be professional. And I think that's what happens when you make a good metric a target. So it doesn't mean recognition shouldn't remain a metric. It's a great metric. But if you make it a target, my summary is people don't like it when something's been done to them. So recognition shouldn't feel like it's something that's been done to you.
And I think just to add to that as well is that when we're kind of speaking to clients, they're looking at return on investment, and we all know that everybody is under kind of pressure to show that return on investment. I think everybody defaults to the platform measure of success by volume as well. So the number of sends, number of nominations, they look at how many people have been rewarded, how much have redeemed their reward, but it's not actually a measure of, back to your point, Matt, it's that feeling, and they're not getting that. So by doing it, you're not really getting you aren't getting the true return on investment that you're running. It's the time, if you're managing your own recognition internally, it's also whether you're kind of using a kind of a provider, a recognition system, it's making sure that it's set up and that your team managers, I think as well, they feel like that's their kind of measure of success.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I'll just add to that on the tech before we go on to survey fatigue is recognition has one of the highest standard deviations of all the factors that make employees happy and engaged at work. What that means is if you take another factor like relationships, it's quite a low standard deviation. What that means is what we seek from relationships is quite similar. What we seek from recognition is very different. So again, if you just make it productized and you just make it standardized, you've got more likelihood of getting it wrong. So whether you're using like a great system like Pluxee's recognition system or you're not, the key is to be thinking about what's the best way to recognize this individual versus like the target says, like Nat said, I'll get 15 out this week. It's better to think about it and do it properly and slower and more meaningful than just to try and pump out some targets. So I think that's probably a good place to move on from that, isn't it, to the next one?
Yeah, and I think it's almost a natural evolution to talk about fatigue or survey fatigue, because I think both in terms of customers and employees, we get lots of them. So the question we're going to be looking at, and the other second element that we're going to be talking about, is whether survey fatigue is a myth or is it action fatigue that is actually driving people crazy?
So I'm especially, and this is one of the reasons I love working with Matt, is that all these businesses do a lot of surveys. It might be that quarterly, and we're asking what people think and their feedback. If leadership, and I say leadership because I'm also a true believer that it feels like this stuff should be HR's problem, and this is part of why I'm a true believer of this session that we run and the one at the event, is that it isn't just HR's responsibility to fix all these things. And especially when it comes to the surveys, it's always they need to kind of, how do we fix this? But actually the leadership need to look at it and take responsibility and act it. But it's actually more damaging. And I know, Matt, you'll have a lot more to say on this than I do with what you do. But it's a lot more damaging to keep running surveys and doing nothing off the back of it.
Absolutely. I'm just going to go to Esther's question really quickly, Nat, before I answer that. So Esther said, what metrics would you recommend at senior leadership level to understand the impact and success of your recognition program? If I was you, Esther, what I've seen where it works really well, we can help with this if you need help, which is you take your cultural data, you overlay it with your financial data, you run some pattern recognition, and then find out where the strongest correlations are between the two. It's way simpler than I've just made it sound. But if you need some help doing that, what I'm effectively saying is, going back to that point earlier about the standard deviation being high, it means you need to run the maths to get your own metrics for your business, because I don't know what business Esther's in, but we were working with a manufacturing business in Huddersfield last week, and a minute later we're working with a tea picking organization in Kenya. So the answer is not as simple as, this is why I struggle with things like, for example, employee net promoter score. Employee net promoter score is a certain good metric in certain contexts, but your business is different to everyone else's. So that's the micro answer to Esther's. On the point around survey fatigue, the first thing is, the elephant and the mistake people make is not explaining why. I run a survey company and I hate filling out surveys. So I'm a proud and happy to say that, right? Nobody likes filling out surveys. So what they want is action off the back of something. So if you explain why you are doing it, then you will get that feedback in there that's going to help you improve the business. Because ultimately you need to tell people the reason we're doing this is to make the culture better for you. But if you don't A, do that, and B, someone very senior, ideally the CEO, has to say that. Otherwise, most of our customers work is done out of HR, but the message can't come from HR. Otherwise, people are cynical. They think this is another HR initiative. It has to come from someone highly senior to signal this is really important. And that links back to the last point, which is you need to encourage your employees to write negative stuff in there and things that they're not happy with, which is counterintuitive. But the CEO standing up saying, look, I want you to tell me everything that's wrong with this business, because I'm going to work on the one or two main priorities. I can't fix everything, but I will work on what you tell us is how you build trust. So survey fatigue comes when you don't explain why and you never action anything. And the third point, and then I will shut up, is can you put in the chat whether you're breaking child labour laws? Now, this again sounds like an extreme question to ask someone, but I'm hoping nobody's going to write in the chat saying they're breaking child labour laws. What the reality is, every single person you employ is an adult. So everything that you have to deal with as a leadership team, they're already dealing with within their own life. They're dealing with P&L issues, cost of living, they're dealing with resource issues, they're dealing with things that are keeping up at night. So there isn't an issue in your business that you won't be able to stand up in front of your employees and say, we've heard that we have an issue on bullying. This is how we're going to deal with it. So my encouragement is, don't try and think of high scores as good and low scores as bad, going back to that target bit. This is how you beat the survey fatigue. You engage people in the process, because otherwise you're going to be people like me. It's going to go in your inbox and you're going to think, I don't have time for this, I'm going to hit delete. So that was a bit of a long answer on that one. Anything to add?
I think just going back, and that answers a bit of Ben's question that he put in the group. around how do you manage expectations that
yes.
not all individual. Yeah, so you've just answered that, I think. And I think it's also going back to the point, I know you mentioned trust. I think surveys and not doing anything is one of the biggest kind of things that break the trust. And I think people have a lot more kind of that trust builds, and I think it's that respect piece builds, is when a leadership team acknowledge actually where the kind of lower scores are, and actually they come out, acknowledge it. Like you said, Matt, they can't fix everything. But I think that's then a bit going back to Esther's question and what you said, there's a kind of a bit before that. And Matt, I know you talk about a lot of this in your report, but it's about the psychological safety, having that and getting people to feel safe that they can say something. And I think, again, going back to the survey fatigue and doing a survey, that does not, by not acting that doesn't build psychological safety. But also then when you talk about the understanding kind of the success of your recognition programs and what you said, Matt, doing the maths, but there's the layer before that on what are your business values. People like me and Matt cannot come in and say to you, these should be your values. These need to be your values based on what do you want to achieve. And I've said this before, that the modern way to kind of create your values or embed your values and your behaviors is to look at what your objectives are for the next 6 months, 12 months, using that kind of, those two kind of things that Matt said, and making sure you've got strong values that match where you need to go for a business.
Yeah, and I think Ben's question is so real and so live, and it happens in every organization. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the context setting at the beginning of the CEO saying, we're going to listen and then we are going to work on the stuff that can have the biggest impact. There'll be stuff in here that we can't fix. I'll give you a classic example. We work with Canary Wharf PLC. If their employees want to work from a different location, it's almost physically possible because they are Canary Wharf PLC. That's where it is. And I've seen CEOs do this so many times where they stand up and they say, these are 10 things you've said. I can only fix 2 of these that I cannot get onto this year because of these reasons. The respect level for the CEO goes up the moment you're just honest, rather than the instinct is to bury or ignore or not mention. But, and I say this in a joking way, is a tendency of CEOs, and I'm in the room with them quite often, and they'll say to me, oh, Matt, we can't mention this. Because it's something negative. And I'll say, well, the problem is the people already know this. And the CEO will say, well, if we tell them, it will make it worse. And I'm like, well, everyone already knows, you're the last person to find out. So if you don't acknowledge what they've said, it's going to get worse because you're going to look like you're just gaslighting everyone. So it takes confidence to do it, to bring up stuff you can't fix. But just that moment of saying, yeah, look, we know people want to move location or they want to move to a 4-day work week. We can't do that this year. It's off the agenda, but these are the 2 things we're going to focus on. Although hard messaging, the respect levels go up so quickly when you're honest with people. And that's my point about nobody's working for you is a child. Everyone is an adult. So yes, they might not agree with everything, but they prefer to be leveled with than if you try and hide stuff away, which it's a natural human tendency to do that. I think we better move on to the next one, Matt, better we?
Yes.
Timing.
Yeah.
So I do have before you leave this, I think there is an important thing, if you don't mind, that I wanted to just bring up. And the fact and the paradox about surveys, I think, is that in many organizations, they're seen as a tick box exercise. Oh, yeah, we do an annual survey. We really care about our employees. We do an annual survey. On the other side of that, a lot of people will say, well, an annual survey isn't enough. Things change too frequently. Therefore, we need to do this more often. Now, that I can see how that might lead to survey fatigue. However, to your points that you've been making, as long as there's some action, and one of the terms I use is don't ask if you can't act. As long as there's some action and it's perceived, and I think it kind of goes to what David's talking about, actioning the survey findings isn't enough. There needs to be a high degree of visibility about survey actions and responses. So I think while I wouldn't suggest you do surveys every month or maybe every quarter, as long as people are seeing that, and I think you already said that, but I think just in terms of this discussion about how often we should be surveying, I think that's a valid point.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, like we work with UK Sport, so they're running on a 4-year cycle of Olympics. they have some scenarios where they're serving certain things every 4 years because it's a review and improvement process. There are some teams and some models where we're monitoring 24/7. So again, it goes back to what is the right setup for the organization. Some of our employees do survey every day. It sounds extreme to some people who hear it, but in the right context, it works. Some people are on a 4-year Olympic cycle. Again, it's about fitting to your organization and what you need for it.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Yeah. So the next elephant that we're going to talk about, and again, you've sort of touched on some of these elements already, is the dark side nobody talks about.
Yeah. So I think with this one, if you say recognition has a dark side, it sounds like you're really against recognition. But again, this is why getting your foundations right, how you communicate it, how you enable recognition, and that's from a leadership and how you enable your managers. I think if you have got a really poorly designed system, it doesn't just fail. So you're not getting the usage, you're not getting the behaviors, but it can actually be counterproductive and actively can create resentment. And I think this goes, and if I give an example, is that it might be that you've got hospitality, you've got front of house nominating each other constantly, back of house, kitchen cleaners, maintenance, almost receiving nothing. I think that can create resentments between teams, between people. I think an example I've been given before is where, and I always use this example as a personal one, is that I did the event with Matt. I'm doing this webinar right now. And what tends to happen, what I've seen in other businesses, is it would be me that gets all the recognition for it. And I really dislike that, because I wouldn't be doing this or being able to do this if it wasn't for certain people within my business. And that's why at the event, I kind of called out, I did it very off the cuff, called out Ravi, who I worked with. And then when I went into our kind of town hall business meeting the other month, I made sure when I talked about how it went, what was the feedback, all of this stuff, I made sure that I had one big slide on the team that supported me through that and made sure they all got recognition, because I think it really can create resentment. It can create people not working together properly. And I think for me, I don't know, Matt, if you've got much to add to this one.
I think there's a really good cat meme that explains this. Don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's where there's a cat, there's an adult human being that is patting one cat on the head, and the other cat just looks really sad, and it kind of sums it up. But the bit that I add to it again is, the more you need a framework to make sure it happens, but the more it feels like, again, something that's been done to you, it doesn't feel natural. So Nat did that recognition for the team because that felt natural to her. If then that became the thing that she did every week at the same time in the same town hall, then it suddenly feels repetitive. Like, we've all got like scheduled emails. We could send an email every Friday that goes out to the team to say well done, but quite quickly it starts to feel like it's not really it's not real, and it starts to feel performative. So I think it's all about just embedding the understanding in the organization that recognition is important, but then find creative ways. Let your creativity flow. There has to be fun ways to recognize people. That there's a slightly different way of doing it, but then build in the tech, like where you can use tech to support you, to remind you. Birthdays is a great example of that, isn't it? Like, there's no way that you can remember when everyone's birthdays are, but if you get a little message saying, "Oh, just remind us of Ravi's birthday," or it's Jerry's birthday coming up, that's not a bad thing, so that you don't forget someone's birthday. So use tech when you can, but try and keep the creativity for the human beings.
I'm just going to pick up on a couple of questions.
Yeah, go on. I just saw those. Yeah, you go.
The one that we've got from Lindsay on what should you do when employees say they don't need recognition. And I don't know, Lindsay, if you can answer the question I've got. Is that from a survey you've run, or is it specific employees that have said they don't need it? If you could let us know what you mean in terms of that, because the only reason why that highlighted with me is I actually don't like, it sounds silly, I don't like being praised publicly, or I'd rather others do, and that resonates with me. But at the same time, again, when you've got good from a survey we have run, okay, so and Matt will probably be able to cover a little bit more on that side of it.
Right.
But for me, it's making sure that, one, obviously you are recognizing for the right things, the values, the behaviors that you've got in your business or you want to have in your business, and then making sure as well that you have got people, that you've got high performers. And again, you don't just recognize those high performers, but the way that you message somebody is high performing is then showing to the rest of the business, right, that's what that looks like. But then there's also, it's not just about the high performers, it's about everybody else and kind of what they're being recognized for. And ultimately, if you aren't recognizing those behaviors and those values publicly, then how can everybody see what they should be doing? That's my kind of flip of it, as much as I don't like it. But then still, I now get with our new recognition platform and our app, is that I get my messages ping up. And I genuinely, as much as I go, oh, I genuinely I do internally do like it. It's just more the public in front of people that I don't really like.
To build on what Nat's saying, I think one of the issues here with this is HR language. And if you think about it, recognition is just a made up thing, isn't it? A made up phrase. Like, it's like something that we use in HR language, really, if we're really honest. So I think it combines David's point here, David Pickett, around how you take surveys and then link it into Lindsay's bit, because I saw that in a survey, Lindsay, in my own company within the happiness index. And what we did is we took it out and we spoke to teams, and that happened in one of my teams. The conversation that was had became a more human conversation. So I remember speaking to our CTO who'd said the same. So I said to him, so if you do a good job, what do you want to happen from our side? And what came out of that conversation was, he said, I'd love to just go for a coffee with you and talk about how that project went. So out of that data and out of that survey came really great conversations that helped us understand. So the survey, like David was saying at the top, it's just part of like the process. But then you have to get out of the survey, get out of HR talk, get out of our HR department, and just go and speak to human beings and try and understand what people mean by the feedback, and just use it as a start point for conversation, because we had the same feedback in our organization and it turned into a really positive conversation. So the data has to come out of the surveys, out of the team, and go into the conversations. Helen Creswell, we've had feedback from our neurodivergent colleagues that public recognition is just the worst thing for at least some of them. I consistently hear that. And I think that is the point again about working with your teams and finding out, drop the jargon and speak to people one-on-one and say, like, if you've done a good job and I want to thank you for doing a good job, what's the best thing to do? And I reckon you get some great stuff out there. But Helen, 100% hear you on that. And we see that a lot. And also outside one of the things I've learned about modifying data based on the neurodivergency is a lot of the fixes actually are great for everyone, because even someone who's not neurodivergent can also think that this is cringe, that I'm being made to go on stage and given like this thing in front of everyone. So I think that's a great adaptation of just trying to sit with people and understand what would you like to happen if you've done a good job.
And I think as well, Matt, to that point, it's not also just the person receiving the recognition. If you do have neurodivergence, kind of giving out nominations, it can be something that's forgotten about. It's not, but actually when we think about neurodiversity, specifically ADHD, actually they have so much empathy, and it's normally is that they put off doing it because they really want to have thought put into writing it. And actually it kind of both, it needs to work for, and for recognition to work for neurodivergence, is that it's making sure that it's set up right for somebody that needs to be able to give recognition and also receive recognition, and having that kind of easy support in place. And that's why having it on your phone, it's having things that can kind of remind them that this is still here. So yeah, I think we're talking quite a lot, Matt. Like, this is happening again, like what happened at the last.
Yeah,
where we're talking a lot indeed.
We should go on to the next one. I just want to add a tiny one though, that obviously this links into feedback as well, doesn't it? This whole subject, like we see in our data, you can't have a high performing culture without a feedback culture. And the specificity, I can't even say that word, but being specific with your feedback in recognition and general feedback is so important. I was working with our CEO in Romania, who'd done an amazing job on this keynote. And I said to him, well done. And then he pulled me to the side and said, Matt, if you ever say well done to me, you need to specifically tell me why. Otherwise, I think you're being disingenuous. I've slightly paraphrased the conversation, but you will have people in your organization, if you're not specific about why you recognize them or specific about your feedback, they'll think that you're being disingenuous. So again, if you're going to say well done to someone, just think about that. Think about the specifics, and that's why I love some of the important neurodivergent conversations, because a lot of the adaptations are better for everyone anyway. Who doesn't want feedback that isn't specific? Like just going shouting out like well done. It's useful, but it's not as good as saying well done for this, because once you've learned why that worked, that's good to repeat that behavior. But you're right. Let's move on to the next one, Matt.
Well, I think it's a natural segue, because what you've been talking about is the value of honest feedback, honest conversations in recognizing people. And the question here, therefore, is AI generated recognition? Is it making it worse, not better? And this is back at the heart of what you were thinking about.
And if people could tell us in the chat what they think once Nat opens, I think that'd be great. Let us know what you're thinking, and I'll watch them, Nat, while you talk.
So this was one submitted by the live Slido that we had at the event, and I got quite excited about when it came through, because as we know, AI, everyone's using it. There's some businesses that are really implementing it with the education around it and how to use it. Obviously, that's still not everybody that's doing it. And I think, which kind of fits definitely within to what we're going to discuss. And I think it's used incorrectly, or using it which ultimately to be more efficient, but actually makes it more inefficient and what I've done is I put like an example kind of prompt, is that, and I'm just going to use it before I get into the detail of it, is that write a recognition message for Marcus in product. That's just giving out a load of words with zero substance at all. And I'd read that and I'm like, well, I don't really know what this person's done. Sounds great and very kind of articulate, but it's not giving you actually anything. And me as an example, I genuinely do use AI for I'm being honest, I do use AI for my recognition, but I'll be honest, I was terrible at English when I was younger. And I've got loads of things in my head that I want to say about this person. But one, I'm restricted by word count, but two, I want to make sure exactly what I'm trying to say comes across. And what I've done is kind of done a structure that I use. So it's their name. I don't always we've got our own system, so I don't actually have to put their name. It selects them. I put them against their behavior, the value. But I want to be specific about the action that they've done. And also my biggest thing is it's actually about recognizing that person's character and their strengths, because what we tend to do is we tend to just say, oh, they've done this, but actually I think it needs to be personable to making them feel that their strength and their character that has done that action to get this gives you better feeling, I think, than just doing it based on what the task was that they did, what the business impact is. So especially if you're looking at, is this revenue driven or is this certain, it's kind of showing that value, and then also the value that it aligns to. And I made one up for, as you can see, Marcus's, which was, it's that they own it, that that's the value I've aligned it to. And then the other thing for me, it's about the time. So especially as you can see from this session, we want to kind of cut through the jargon, the noise. We want to just be real and direct. And I think, again, if you look at that first bad output, it's giving you a lot of words, sounds very professional, and it's like instantly, I know, I mean, everybody will know the feeling of when you get those long dashes coming through, you instantly know that it's come from AI. But for me, is when it's used as a shortcut with no, as it says there, with no real thought behind it. And this is a term that I've used, and Matt, I don't know if you've heard it. It's called AI slop now. So I thought, yeah, it's the new terminology. It's called AI slop, and I think, like we've just said, people can really tell. So it's not the tool that is the problem; it's the intention. I
just want to read out Anna's. In construction, our landscapers love the AI text and images due to it being simplified and there isn't an intense message. Office staff do not like it due to it feeling like a lack of effort. It is tricky to balance recognition for a company with a big split workforce. That's just another great example, isn't it? And finding the difference between teams, locations, and so on. I think that's a great observation, Anna, and sort of summarizes the difficulty of it, but also if you get it right, how powerful it can be. And as Helen says, above that, one size does not fit all. I think that's the biggest lesson in that. I think a couple of examples on Nat's points here. I had one this weekend because I'm a youth football coach, and all the children had written like little notes, but one of them had definitely been done by one of the parents through ChatGPT. And it was just funny because like we joked about it, but like there was these like really badly written ones by actual kids, and they're like, I really felt emotional reading them. But then I got to this like clearly one that had been through ChatGPT, and it instantly just my instinct, even though I'm a grown up, I just felt like a little disappointed. Then we made it, then everyone noticed it and it became a joke, and it was all funny, and we talked about it. But on that point of organizing your brain as well, like can you just type in the chat if you were at the employee engagement conference? Just want to touch on one of Jerry's colleagues, who you might have seen hosting the main stage at the conference in Charlotte Dahl. Some of you will know her. I've seen her do that for a long time now, and I watch her and I'm like, that's just blooming brilliant. Like I wish I could host, because I'm used to doing the talking, but I think the hosting is a different ball game, and it's very difficult. And I went up to her and tried to give her recognition, and just looking at her face, I think I was like offending her. I think I was coming across as if I was patronizing her. And I said to her, I'm going to go home and just write down what I was trying to say to you. And like I used AI to formulate my thoughts. What it helped me come up with is what I was trying to say is that she is instinctively interested in other human beings, right? But if you say that to someone, you sound like you're just a nutter, don't you? I was like, I just love the fact how interested you are in the people that you're interviewing, but I couldn't get the words out. So I then went away and used AI to formulate it, and then I put it as a LinkedIn review for her. And she messaged me saying like it meant a lot because she'd had a tough day, blah, blah, blah. But face to face, I totally butchered it. I lost all my words, and it was terrible. And I could see on her face, she was thinking, what is this guy talking about? But once I got home and used a bit of AI to formulate what was in my head, I could send it over to her. So I think if the intent is always there and you use AI on that point, I think it can be really incredible for people like myself, where all the ideas there, but you can't necessarily put it into a framework.
Well, I think to your point about the kids, your football kids. Sorry, Snell, I'm just going to say your point about the football kids is sort of like out of the mouths of babes. And I think that was that was it. Well, they were writing it rather than speaking it, or maybe they were speaking it. It's that, the truth comes out in that way. And I think what you've just described, that experience you had with Charlotte, I think that most people, and I've been on the receiving end of that, and it's great. I mean, frankly, I don't mind how it's said. If someone really appreciates me, that's great to hear, especially, doing this kind of stuff. And I think just in the interest of time, I think we want to sort of move on to our final elephant. And I think this is a really interesting one, because when you think about, quite often I see when they're doing people are doing presentations, they talk about rewards and recognition as if they're the same thing. And clearly what we know is that they're not. And in this particular elephant, employees think recognition means a pay rise, and it doesn't. It's different from rewards, if you like.
So this also came from, yeah, can you hear me? Okay, I had a bit of a blip out a minute ago.
Yeah,
cool. So this also came as a comment from somebody that was at the event on the chat, and I took a lot of time thinking about it, because I think, again, it comes down to where recognition hasn't worked properly in the UK. And Matt, I don't know if you're of this same view, happy to be told that is that people don't actually really truly understand the recognition and what's the psychology about it. And Matt, I know you'll 100% get that bit, and have all the data behind it. And what is it that recognition does? And I think it's, if in a business they just view a pay rise as the recognition, then it's the only signal of value someone gets is their salary, which, let's be honest, with the current climate, it's getting harder and harder to give kind of pay rises. You've got your kind of finance director, CEO, they're all, the cost of businesses, it's getting harder. But I think that's what then recognition becomes. And for us at Pluxee, what we try to do is get our clients to truly understand how recognition is different, and actually what is it that what is it that the value that it drives for you as a business. What ultimately long term, it's the revenue. But if we look at, by not having recognition, and we know this, is that actually back to Matt's report, is that acknowledgement scores one of the lowest kind of markers in the report. Actually, it's costing businesses by not having something in place.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes back to the sort of like seeing business and life as like a factory and employees as units and robots. We don't have time to go into the neuroscience of it, but effectively our bodies are scanning all the time to check it's safe, to check, are we adding value? If you think of human beings in a tribe, we're social animals. We are trying to make sure that we're contributing, that we're part of it. And when you recognize someone that is doing all those things, it's recognizing that, yeah, you are a valuable member of the tribe. This is a safe place for you. And they're just tiny little things, but they make a massive difference. And as you know, like everyone here, like if you're in fight or flight, all your resources are being expended on that fight or flight energy, or freeze, which is a third one that people forget about a lot. Whereas you want people focused on the task. And if these little things, these little human things that make life feel not transactional, can make a difference, then they should be used. But again, I think a lot of it goes back to thinking of the like humans as a factory and us as robots. And you just got to forget, like, we're just human beings at the end of the day, and all these are just little things. Everything that makes us happy, engaged, and recognized hasn't been invented in the last 5,000 years. Like, it's still the same stuff that would have helped you feel recognized 5,000 years ago. We just got all this technology and all this funny language to do it. It's always been needed. It's not a new thing. I just wonder, can I just touch really? Yeah.
Sorry, Matt, I was just going to say, go on, Matt, carry on. I was going to say questions on something, but I was just, before we continue, and just off the back of what you're saying, and again, I kind of touched on this at one of your events, Matt, that I was looking at my son and that he knows all his values in his school. And I called out that how many people in the room do know their company values and what they mean, and they couldn't. But then my son can completely, I mean, he's just turned 8, he can shout them out. And it made me really think that we are so conditioned from a very young age of getting that recognition and praise, and it based around your kind of school values and behaviors, that it genuinely is in, it's how we've learned, it's how we've grown. It's by being given that recognition, or using those values that you've got within your school to recognize. And that's even if, for example, if they've been maybe told off for something, it's using it. We're so conditioned as human beings to be recognized.
Yeah. And I think this,
and I think as well, Matt, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just going to add, there's definitely a nature and nurture element to it. I think it's developed, but it is also human innately in us. I think Millie's question I'm going to try and do in 10 seconds because we're running out of time. I'll add my LinkedIn so you can add me, Millie. But managing recognition during times of organizational change. If you look at the traditional Kubler-Ross change curve, it's not really adapted for what human beings are, which is emotional. Most comms on this subject are rational, and they forget the human emotional side of it. And again, I know I sound like a broken record. once it feels transactional, it's not going to take people through the change curve, because when people are going through change, it's an emotional feeling for people, and you have to meet them. And the best way to meet people who are going through a big change of emotions is short, sharp stories rather than loads of rational stuff. So people just want to feel safe at that point if you're going through a lot of change.
So I think
what we've done, sorry, Jerry, I will, same as you, Matt, I'll put my LinkedIn, because there's another thing I was going to cover on this that was just off the back of what you've said, Matt. So this is why we ended up in doing this. We just talk too much.
Well, I think it's not been that at all. I think you've shared some wonderful information, some real-time stories, some real ways, and answered many questions, which is great. And I think just to sort of get to the close, what would you tell people? You've talked about what's broken, and if someone was listening today and there was something they could do on Monday morning, and not a program, not a platform, what would you actually tell them? If you can do that in 60 seconds, that'll be wonderful.
I can go first, Matt, if you want.
Yeah, you go first.
Because I'll do mine in 10 seconds. Ask all your managers to go for a coffee, virtual or in real life, and ask their team members, if you do a good job, what would you like us to do in response to that? And you'll be fascinated by the answers. They might think you're a weirdo for asking the question, but you know what? That's not a problem.
My biggest thing, and I could talk a lot longer, but is that if we do not face this, and it's very much going back to when we talked about the surveys, if we don't face it, we don't look at actually what is going wrong, own it and make the change, then it's never going to get better. And I think that is definitely why we're in a position where really recognition in the UK isn't working properly.
And I think one of the things that I know Matt's put something in the chat, and I think you wanted to provide information to our audience about your newsletter, which I think has a lot of information in it as well, if they sign up for the newsletter, and many of the things that you've spoken about today, and I'm sure many others will be available to them.
And thank you, Jerry.
So what we have done is we've shared. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We've shared a handout in the group that kind of gives you a quick summary of kind of the session, just maybe some things that you could take away, which also gives you a link to our newsletter for you to sign up to as well.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. And as I said, great information, really good real-time story, and some things that people don't have to wait till Monday. They can take some of these things and start working with their teams today. So I think it's great information. So thank you to Nat Parkin and Matt Phelan for a conversation that was honest, direct, and one that we hoped resonated with many of you in the room. And thank you to all of our audience, and especially the ones that asked the questions, for bringing those questions to the fore and your honest responses. So Nat and Matt, thank you very much. And thank you to our audience. And don't forget, be careful out there.